Okay, Moderna's up 20% today on news that the South African variant could be really serious. The whole market is crashing out, and then the kind of shut down stocks are reacting really strongly. So Moderna being a key one. Moderna, BioNTech, Pfizer are having really good days. So let's talk about it. We're fortunate enough to own it in our model portfolios and for some of our clients. So I think there's more reasons to own it other than COVID. Now, I want to back up just a little bit to Q3. Q3 is their last quarterly that they released, and the stock came down significantly. Personally, I think that was oversold. I kind of get why it happened, although I felt like I didn't learn anything on the conference call that I didn't already know. There was just saying we're not sure how sustainable it is. Are we going to be through the COVID-19 in the next year or two? There was some uncertainty, but I think that was already a question out there. And I was a little surprised that the reaction was that harsh, because the actual numbers in Q3 were pretty darn strong. And we'll go over those in a second. But, good quarter. The guidance in the news about it could be over was already priced in my opinion. Well, it wasn't priced in evidently, but the news was clearly out there. It should have been priced in. Okay, enough of that. What's going to happen going forward? Why should you still own the stock? Well, especially it has come back even after today's rise. We're still way off from prior to Q3. Okay, so first of all, the COVID-19 the virus as is could last longer than anticipated, right? It could just linger on. It might not be as easy to extinguish as maybe we thought. Well, I don't think anybody thought it was easy, but we're doing pretty good with vaccines. Pretty good. We could do better, but pretty good. But it could last longer. Okay, number one. Number two, booster shots. Looks like this is just a thing now. Some not sure. Maybe it's going to happen. Maybe we need it. Maybe we don't. It looks almost inevitable at this point that it's going to happen. Okay, children 5 to 12 are now approved for vaccination in the U.S. and I think in Canada as well. And I'm sure that's just going to open up around the world. Much of the world is still unvaccinated. So part of the problem on the conference call was the fact that the developed world was doing pretty decently, and they had to turn their attention to the underdeveloped world where they would not be getting the same prices. Okay. But nonetheless, it is a massive market, and, maybe governments will subsidize the cost. Yeah, they'll probably have to lower it. But it's still such a massive market that, and so critical that I just think that's a good enough reason right there. Variants could arise. Obviously, they could arise. They're arising right now. The whole reason the stock is up today is because of a variant. Now, that could, we don't know. We don't know if this is like the last one. That seems kind of naive. So there's lots of things that could happen. We don't even know how serious this one is yet. There's this distinct possibility. Oh, let's say we're getting away from COVID type reasons now, right? There's a distinct possibility that mRNA technology could be used for the flu vaccine. They're in trials right now. There's no reason from how the science works, in my understanding. I'm not an expert, but my understanding on how they sequence the genome and the whole process. There's no reason you can't just repeat it for the regular flu vaccine, in my opinion. Now, I'm sure it's not that simple, but they're going through that process right now, and that's huge. That's something you need every year. And my understanding from flu vaccine, or the flu itself, is it's slightly different. It's a different strain every year. You need a slightly different vaccine, and they kind of have to guess at it. Well, if you can sequence the genome and put the proper messenger RNA in there to take care of it, it's going to be much more efficient. So I think that is a huge reason. Now, that's all, there's not 1 ounce of revenue for that right now, but that could be huge. Okay. There are other viruses that are candidates for mRNA, like Zika, HIV, This other one called HMV, which is it's a rare autoimmune disease, but significant enough in children and newborns. That's a pretty big market too. Okay, number 8. There are other diseases like cancer that this might be a treatment for. In fact, mRNA was studied more closely for cancer, more promising for cancer. Certainly, COVID wasn't even around, so it was like they thought it was the most promising thing for cancer treatment, and then COVID came along, and it kind of said, "Well, you know what? This kind of makes sense." So cancer treatment is still on the table. Imagine if that works, the same effectiveness as it does for the COVID-19. That's incredible. So we'll see about that. That's also, not a sure thing. Okay, due to the COVID-19 cash windfall, the company now has more resources. This is a big deal. A couple of years ago, the company was generating like 16 million in revenue, and barely had any money. And if you were a scientist or an engineer working on these things, you might wonder if you even had a job in the next year, or if you'd have funding for whatever you were working on. Well, that's not an issue, right? So there's lots of things to pursue. The pipeline's pretty strong. The existing COVID-19 is not dying, as we can see. So there's lots of reasons to own it. Having said that, there's definitely some risks. Let's not go crazy and think that there's no risk. Maybe it was just a perfect thing for COVID-19 and all these other things. It really doesn't work as well. It's possible. It's very possible. I don't think so. I would, just based on probabilistic thinking, I think some of these other things have got to work out. Okay. Lastly, do want to show the model, although I want to say the model's more appropriate for some companies than others, and I would say in this one it's somewhat less appropriate, although important. I wanted to show that the rates of return were nothing, and then now they skyrocketed. In fact, that's a 90%. It's right off our chart, so you can't see the number, but it's 90, which is huge. Obviously, you don't get 90% return on invested capital very often. They put capital to work, or they actually, because they made money, that money is now considered capital. So they've got $7 billion worth of capital now. Or excuse me, $12 billion worth of capital, and they earned $7 billion in EBITDA in the trailing 4 quarters. That's pretty big numbers. Let's take a look at the income statement quickly. This is like one of the most hilarious income statements I've ever seen. In March 2020, so just before the pandemic, was readily obvious or readily apparent. In March 2020, and then, after that. So they had 8 million in revenue, 8 million. And then September 2021, 4.9 billion. I mean, it's not even the same ballpark. I've never seen revenue growth like that. I mean, you can go look at Apple, Google, Amazon, any one of them. I don't think any of them went from 8 million to 4.9 billion in that short a time frame. We all know I can't repeat myself enough here. We all know it's a windfall. We all know there's sustainability issues, but that is one heck of a run, and it's created, quite a windfall for the company. Okay, so let's wrap that up. Just a quick summary. There's more to this story. It's not just COVID, although I do think COVID could last longer than originally anticipated. I would be in the stock. There is some risk, so I would not be taking a big position. If you're normally at 5% of your portfolio in one stock, maybe take that down to 2.5. If you've got more stocks than that, maybe take it down to 1. So that's how we're playing it, and we're glad we're in it.